The sun's energy. Why do we care about sun's energy, or why do we need sun's energy? The answer is very clear and very simple. If there is no sun's energy or if there is no sunlight, probably we cannot imagine any kinds of life on this earth. That means life on earth is dependent on sun's energy. We get light from the sun, and many plant species, they can produce their food in the presence of light. We will talk about it. Sun produces a lot of energy, and out of that all energy, only 1% energy will reach to the earth's surface. And even from that 1%, only half of that 1% will be absorbed by the earth's surface, and the remaining half will be reflected back to the space. And sun's energy travel in bundles called the photons. In other words, the small particle of sunlight is called photon. Then when there are a lot of photons, we call them light. So light is the collection of photons. This picture will make very clear why we need sunlight on this earth. Here you can see a green plant and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is available on the air. Carbon dioxide is carbon 1 molecule, oxygen 2 molecule, CO2 carbon dioxide. Then water H2O, hydrogen 2 molecules, and oxygen 1 molecule H2O. When there is carbon dioxide and when there is water, green plants, they can produce their own food in the form of sugar in the presence of sunlight. In the presence of sunlight, they can convert carbon dioxide and water to sugar. That is the form of energy. And of course, from the process of photosynthesis, another byproduct would be oxygen, 2 molecules of oxygen. So in short, photosynthesis is the process where the light energy, where the solar energy will be converted into chemical energy. In very simple language, photosynthesis is the process where plants can make their own food in the presence of sunlight, and these sugars is the form of energy. They produce the sugar and they utilize sugar for their growth and development. Only the plants, they have this capacity. They can utilize solar energy and convert carbon dioxide and water to sugars. But as human beings, we cannot do that. None of the animals, they cannot do it. It's not possible through animals. It's only possible through plant system, not through animal system. So this will make photosynthesis more clear. Here we have carbon dioxide and here we have water. When there is carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight, plants can make glucose and produce oxygen. So again, the solar energy is converted to the chemical energy, and this process is called photosynthesis. See on this food pyramid, the bottom one are the producers, and producers are always the plants. They produce food for rest of the groups. Primary consumers, they are solely or they are fully dependent on plants. They directly consume plants and they survive. So they are the primary consumers. Secondary consumers, they probably do not consume plants directly, but they consume the animals which are dependent on plants. So they are the secondary consumers. And the tertiary consumers, they are dependent primarily on secondary consumers. Sometimes they can consume primary or even producers, but they are primarily dependent on secondary consumers. So they are the tertiary consumers. So can you think where we are in this food pyramid, where the human beings are. Human beings are always on the top of the food pyramid. Though we consume plants directly, we also consume primary consumers and probably sometimes secondary consumers. So, human beings are always on the top of the food pyramid and we are the tertiary consumers. Climate. When we talk about climate, we cannot forget about weather. What is the difference between weather and climate? The major difference between weather and climate is defined by the period of time. How long period we are thinking about. If we are thinking about 1 day, 1 week or 1 year, then it could be we are thinking about weather. But if we are thinking about weather for a long period of time, about 25 to 30 years, then that is climate. For example, if I say weather condition in Warrensburg today, I'm correct because I'm talking about the weather condition for a day. If I say weather condition of Warrensburg after a week, after a month, after a year, I'm still correct because I'm not talking about 25 or 30 years. But if I'm talking about the weather condition for a long period of time, like 25 to 30 years, then I'm talking about climate. People say climate change. Climate change does not mean change within a year or so. Climate change means the change in weather within 25 to 30 years at least. Climate is also a form of weather, but it is the long-term weather. So to be weather, climate, it should have at least 25 to 30 years. If we are not talking for a long period of time, it is just weather, it's not climate. And climate or weather is dependent on different factors like solar energy, how much solar energy we are getting. If you get solar energy from morning to evening, probably our weather would be hot for that day. And if we get that hot weather for years and years, our climate in the region would be hot. Precipitation and water bodies. We live in Warrensburg. We get about 55 inches of water every year in the form of rain, in the form of precipitation. And if we get that amount of precipitation for long period of time, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, then it defines our climate. Otherwise, if we get only that amount of rainfall for a year or for small period of time, that will define the weather only. Then land factor, elevation and air factor, mass of air or wind speed. It also determines the weather condition and at the end, climate of the area. Climate features important to agriculture are precipitation and temperature. Though there are several factors, to determine the climate, two factors are very important: precipitation and temperature. How much rain we get or how much water we get and how our temperature will be looking like for next year, for the coming year and for long period of time. That determines the climate of the area. Precipitation. Precipitation can be in the form of rain, sleet, snow or hail. Any water coming to the earth is called precipitation. And precipitation provides water for plants, for animals, for human beings. And it constitutes about 75 to 90% of most lives, not only plants, also the animals. And water facilitates several important functions in plant and animals. You can see this example. Water requirement by a soybean plant. When the plant is on a small size, just germinated, they use a small amount of water per day. But as the plant grow bigger and bigger, vegetative growth stage, the plant is growing here very fast and they are using more water. And even when the plant is ready to flowering or pod formation, pod filling, then they use the highest amount of water per day. So we have to understand important thing here is that when there is lack of water for any reason, for any chance during the flowering and pod formation, the yield will be decreased. And when the plants are ready for maturity or harvest, they again use some amount of water, but not like at the time of pod filling, a little bit less. But the idea is plants need water from germination or from planting to harvesting, but depending on the different growth stages, the water requirement will be different. This is the earth water cycle. Ocean, we have a lot of water, and water evaporates from the ocean. Water also evaporates from the soil surface. So any water that is going to the space in the form of vapor is called evaporation, and that would be from ground surface and water surface. But if the water is going to the space from the plant surface, we call this as a transpiration. That means plants absorb water and they transpire water. This is the difference. Transpiration is any water evaporates from the plant surface, and evaporation is the any water evaporates from the soil surface and water surface. They go to the space and condensation will be there, and after that again they fall into the ground in the form of rainfall, and rainfall runs to the ocean. Rainfall percolates to the ground and again goes to the ocean, and this cycle will be continued for years and years. Based on the precipitation pattern, amount of rainfall, amount of precipitation, there are different kind of regions around the world. Humid region, that region gets more than 40 inch of water per year. Semi-humid region gets 30 to 40 inch of water in a year, and arid region gets 10 or even less than 10 inches of water in the form of precipitation. So where we are, people living in Warrensburg, are we in humid region, semi-humid, semi-arid, or arid region? Of course we are in the humid region because we get more than 40 inch of rain per year. So we are in the humid region. This figure shows different regions around the world. Let's see, hyper-arid is super dry. Some African parts, some Chinese land, and some parts in South America is hyper-arid. Arid region, dry region. Semi-dry arid region. You can see semi-arid region. This is United States is the typical example of semi-arid and humid regions. Also the some dry humid regions. You can see very clearly here and here. So this is the western part. Many of the western part we have semi-arid to dry sub-humid kind of climate, while here in the eastern part we have humid kind of climate. And different climates can be found around the world at different places. Australia, if you go to Australia, you can see arid to humid region, but most of the Australian parts are under semi-arid or dry humid. Only some part are humid regions. Drought. In simple language, drought is the lack of precipitation for a long period of time, prolonged period of time. It could be few months to several months. If we do not get any precipitation as compared to the normal precipitation, then it is called drought. And drought can result in extensive damage to crops. You can see these figures. The plants are dying, or plants are about to die because of the lack of precipitation. And drought is one of the major factors, major environmental factors that cause about $6 to $8 billion loss in the country. This loss will be coming from the loss in crops. We lose a lot of crops, and because of that we lose money, and it's all because of drought, lack of precipitation for a long period of time. Flood is kind of opposite to drought. Drought was the lack of precipitation for the prolonged period of time, while flood is the excess water on the land, too much water, and it also cause significant crop loss. When there is flooding like this, it will replace oxygen from the surface, and when there is no oxygen, it will create anaerobic condition, and many plant species, they cannot survive within that anaerobic condition. They need oxygen, and because of that we lose about $2.4 billion annually because of the crop loss, because of the yield loss. Temperature is another important factor that determines climate. Temperature is the measure of intensity of heat or energy content. In the United States, temperature is measured on Fahrenheit scale. We talked about that before. Other countries, they use Celsius as a measurement scale for temperature. And temperature will be influenced by latitude, altitude, and proximity to water, how far we are from the water sources. That determines the temperature of the area. How much temperature different plants need for their growth and development? Let's see this one. Plant type, cool season type, for example, winter wheat and alfalfa. Their minimum temperature requirement is about 41 degree Fahrenheit. Optimum is about 56 to 86, and maximum will be about 104. 104 will be the maximum one. Warm season crops, their minimum would be 50, not 41. Their optimum would be a little bit higher than that required by the cold season crops, and their maximum would be again higher than what is required by the cold season crops. Cool season crops are wheat, alfalfa, and several other crops like canola, smooth broom grass, cauliflower, broccoli, carrots. These all are the cool season crops, while the warm season crops are corn, sorghum, soybean, cotton, and some others. Temperature effect on plant process. All plants have optimum temperatures for growth and development. We talked about that on the previous slide. When the temperature increases, then the requirement, then transpiration increases. If you remember, transpiration is the loss of water from the aerial parts of the plant. Here is precipitation, water is coming to the earth, plants are losing water, and the soil surface is also losing water. When plants are losing water, that is called transpiration. When the soil surface is losing water, that is called evaporation. When the temperature increases, transpiration increases. That means plant will lose a lot of water. Then what happens when plants lose a lot of water? Of course, they will feel dry and their cell structure will be affected. Probably you see some plants wilting during the afternoon. That is the result of high temperature stress. How temperature affects plants? How they injure plants? Freezing injury occurs when ice forms in the cells, causing cell damage. Too low temperature. So that means high temperature is not good, low temperature is not good. They need the optimum temperature. You can see here, chilling injury causes disruption of plant cell membrane integrity. So high temperature is not good, cold temperature is not good. They damage the plant cell. How the yield will be affected because of change in temperature, we can see here. This is the temperature, and this is the night temperature actually. Natural year, this is the normal. Average night temperature about 65 degree Fahrenheit. And for that normal temperature, the yield will be 168 bushel per acre. But when the temperature goes about 62, low temperature, yield will be lower. And when the temperature goes higher, 85 as compared to 65, again the yield will be smaller and smaller. We will lose crop yield. So both the high temperature and cold temperature are not good for plants. They need the optimum temperature, because when the temperature goes too hot or too cold, it damages the plant cell. It affects the plant cell. Not only for plants, high temperature affects animals too. If you see this example, normal temperature for dogs is about 100 to 102 degree Fahrenheit. But when the temperature goes higher and higher, they will suffer a lot, and heat stroke may happen to the animals. So animals also do not like higher temperature than what they need. Here is another example. High ambient temperature. The animal, a lot of drooling, panting, and reduced feed intake. And this process will affect the rumen pH. Then this acidity problem will affect milk production. So high temperature is not good for plants, high temperature is not good for animals, and low temperature also not good for animals, not good for plants. They need the optimum temperature or acceptable temperature for their better growth and development. This is the figure corn yield over the years from 1960 to 2010. Many years the corn yield was affected by different environmental factors. Drought reduced 17% yield here, drought again reduced 26% yield here, drought reduced almost 30% yield here, looks like about 1988. Flooding, it affected yield here, and some other unusual climatic events. Unusual means probably drought, hail, too much wind, high wind speed, or something related to the climatic condition. They also affected yield so many times, so that the yield is not consistent over the years. It's increasing, but many years there is a big fluctuation, and some years even we lost yield because of blight. This is the disease. So these are mostly the climatic factors that affected corn yield over the years in the United States. There are different management practices. We can reduce the effect of environmental factors in crops and animal farming. For example, crop residues. We can use crop residues, or it is also called mulching, that influence the soil temperature and soil moisture. We can do the land fallowing. Leave the land without growing a plant for a season or 1 year, then come back to the same land and grow the crops next year. Irrigation supplements the precipitation. Drainage of cropland. I talked before about the lack of oxygen, anaerobic condition. In that condition, probably we need to drain out the excess water from the soil surface. Minimum tillage. Then planting dates and seeding rate. Change the planting dates and seeding rate, and also shifting the location of animals from one place to another place. Then we can control the pest and disease in crops and in livestock. Then we can use fertilizer, and also we can use improved feeding practices for our animals to minimize the effect of environmental condition. And also we have crop and livestock varieties or breeds, we can select the best one that fits for the region, that fits for the certain climatic condition, certain environmental condition. We can select them. I will show you some pictures. This is the mulching. I told you about that in the previous slide. Crop residues are mulch, and this is the example of crop residues and mulching. They help to preserve some water on the soil surface when there is no precipitation. Also, they help to maintain the soil temperature, these residues. And this is the example of fallowing. That means we grow crop in year 1, in year 2 we don't grow anything here, and in year 3 again we come back and grow the crop. So in 3 years we grow 2 crops. That is the crop fallow crop cycle, and that also helps to conserve some moisture during the fallow period, and that moisture can be available for the plants when we grow the plant in the 3rd year. And this is mostly practiced in the dry areas, and this one is also mostly practiced in the dry areas, so it may not be very common in this area. This is the irrigation method. It's called drip irrigation. Drip irrigation provides water for every plant individually. This is the most efficient method of irrigation. And this one is, sprinkler irrigation. And another is flooding irrigation. If you have a lot of water, you can practice flooding irrigation. But in the dry areas, people generally practice drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation. This is the drainage. If we have excess water on this field, we can use the drainage, and the water will be flow into this canal. Then this is minimum tillage. This field is not tilled out. After growing crop, in the next season, they will just do the planting, direct planting without tillage, and that will help to conserve the moisture on the field. Another example is different planting dates. May 2nd, May 17th, May 30th, and June 16th. See the crop height, it's different. So we can practice different planting dates and determine or find out which is the best planting date for the region, for the area, given the climatic condition. And this is the crop variety test program. It is from Texas. I used to work there before, and it was our field when I was there. We used to grow wheat varieties every year, and we used to select best of the best for the region. So that was the wheat variety testing program. And we can do the same thing in case of animals too. We can select the best of the best animal breed for our region to minimize the effect of climatic conditions. I mean, which animal fits for our region based on our climatic situation, based on our environmental situation, we have to keep them. That will help to increase the production, and that will help to increase the profit. This is the typical example of shifting animals from one area to other area, and this is mostly common in the mountain regions, where producers, farmers, they move their animals from higher region, higher areas to the lower region to save from the freezing temperature. And also improving animal feeding program is important to save animals from the bad environmental or climatic conditions, improving feeding practices, and some animals will be happy if they have a lot of water when it's too hot. Here you can see different kind of animals and different breeds within the same species. So we have to select the best one that fits for our region based on our climatic condition. Thank you.